see that we have it. There's our audio. Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Porman, a developer evangelist here at Salesforce, and today I have a very special guest with me. His name is Chris Peterson. Chris, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm the Director of Product Management for Apex, and thank you, Kevin, for inviting me, because this is a convenient excuse to actually go write some code, which is something I've been really looking forward to all week.
Oh, great. And for those of you who didn't catch what his title means, that means if you ever come across a bug in Apex, talk to Chris. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Now, today we're going to be working on a little bit of a sort of a flight of fancy project, as it were. We're going to be adding to Apex Recipes the ability for us to have a logging framework that is based on platform events. And do you want to say a little bit more about what your vision is for that, Chris?
Yeah, so my background coming from an ISV world, so before I joined Salesforce, I worked at Financial Force as an architect on their professional services automation product. And the one thing that always drove me crazy in that context was that I didn't have a good solution for logging. Yeah, I could use system debug to write to debug logs, but if debug logs weren't turned on, my logs went to dev null. There was no way for me to do the type of logging you would expect out of an enterprise application that's this passive in the background logging of important events that didn't have some notable downsides. I could write to a custom object, but that could interfere with callouts. It also counted against my DML limit. And so there was never a really great solution. There were options, there were ways to do it, but there was never a universally correct approach that scaled very well. And when I was going over the release notes for winter 21, I noticed that the platform events team did something massive. They made it so that you can publish platform events through the event bus.publish call without it counting as a database operation for limit perspectives. So I can now fire a platform event. It'll fire synchronously, so even if my transaction rolls back, it'll still escape the transaction. Important for logging, because if Apex rolls back when you have an unhandled exception, you don't want to lose the logs of why. That would really kind of undermine the whole project. So I can escape the transaction, I can not interfere with callouts, and I can then asynchronously do whatever I want with those events. I could write them to a custom object, I could write them to a big object, I could listen to them via the streaming API somewhere else. And so what I see is that we really have all of the tools available to make a real logging framework now. And somebody should sit down and do it, which is what I said to Kevin, and then now I'm here somehow.
If you come to me with a great idea, you're going to end up on the show. It's just the way it works. So, okay, so I've opened up my Scratch org here, and it sounds like the first thing we need to do is set up a platform event.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'll search for platform here, platform events. Now, as you envision this, I mean, what should we call it?
So we could call it custom log event. That makes it clear it's custom. But it's going to have a double underscore E at the end, which also tells us it's custom.
Right. So maybe log?
Yeah, I think we just go with log. Keep it short and sweet.
And, okay, and we'll just save that there. Are you envisioning that we're going to need any fields on this event other than, what it is we want to log?
Yeah, so I think we want a length 255 text field for the request ID, because that's going to be really useful for correlation.
Okay, so we'll grab that. We'll do request ID.
Yep. We may want to put user ID will be on there anyways, so we don't have to worry about that.
How do we want to do text area long for the actual?
Yeah, text area long for the actual log message.
Okay.
We probably want to structure that as JSON so that we can enrich that data somehow, and we can think about how we do that and represent that in Apex classes as we go along. But yeah, it's going to be a long text area. Set it to the max length. I forget what that is off the top of my head.
Okay. And we'll just save that there. So we've got a log message. We've got a request ID.
We might want to throw quiddity on there just for fun.
Isn't that going to be in the request ID?
So it's in the request class where we get request ID from, but it's a separate field. So I would make that a separate text 32. I don't think there's a quiddity longer than that field. And that means that when you're looking at logs, you can tell if they came from queuable Apex or a Visual Force controller or a Lightning controller. And that's useful for some level of analytics on these.
So I gotta ask, Where did we get the word quiddity? I feel like we made that up. Like somebody was a Harry Potter fan and said, "How can I bring in Harry Potter sports into the Apex world?"
Somebody who used to work on the Apex team and still works at Salesforce is a philosophy nerd and is known for leaving comments referencing Buddhist concepts like MU, all over the internal code base. Quiddity was one that he introduced as yet another, I want to introduce a philosophy concept that sort of fits the situation because no other word does to the internal code base. And then when we launched the event monitoring product, it got exposed to customers. So it started out as kind of an internal, hey, silly little name, but it's the best short term we can come up with it. And then it snowballed until it became part of our API, and now it's a thing.
So is it fair to say that Apex is Zen?
Sure, we'll go with that.
Zen in the art of Apex coding?
Yeah.
Okay, so you got quiddity, request ID, log message. Anything else we want to push on our actual log event?
That's all I can think of. Am I missing anything?
No, I think that's probably pretty good. So I'm going to switch away from this to our code base here, and I just have a notes file that I'm going to keep here. So we've got our log _ e, and it has fields of request ID, and log message, and quiddity. I always want to spell quiddity with a T.
Nope. Quiddity. I looked up the definition because I forgot it. It's the inherent nature or essence of someone or something.
Okay. I am a philosophy nerd too, but I had never come across that. So that's good to know. So we got our log message. This is long text, and let's call this JSON. So to make this serializable and deserializable, do we want to just define a log message class with fields on it?
A log message field on it.
Yeah. Like a log message class. So we can just do a class.
Yeah.
Should we call this log message?
Yeah. I like log message. Nice and simple.
Okay. Let's see. Let's put this in. Well, it's going to be in one of these. Do we have a way to create a new one? No. Here, let's create the folder first. Classes, and then new folder. And we'll call this one platform event logs. No, actually we have a platform event recipe, so we'll put it in there. So create a new class, we'll call it log message, and we're going to put it in custom directory of platform event recipes. Hopefully that popped up for you.
Yep, it did.
All right, now it looks like you were specifying a little bit of request ID, quiddity, message body.
Yeah, since we're going to JSON serialize the log message into the platform event, we can actually use a neat little trick of if you define an Apex property that has a getter, we can make it so that it's implicitly part of the JSON without trying to have to calculate it up front. That might be a little bit too smart, but it's fun, and we can do it to make it automatic. Is kind of my thinking.
In the immortal words of Morpheus, show me.
All right. So we got log message. Say we have public. But we want it to be a string just for the sake of JSON because enums get weird when they're serialized. So let's avoid any fun there. Request ID.
Oh, I see what you're doing. You say we're just going to go ahead and get the request in the getter so that we don't ever have to worry about picking that up ourselves. I see what you mean.
So when we serialize it, the getter will run.
Yeah.
And I probably should make this a lazy initialized field so that it doesn't keep re-getting it every time you fetch this. So If it's null, then we initialize it. Return. Now we won't constantly redo it. And let's make a private set just in case we ever need it.
I like it. I like it. And so we can do the same thing with the quiddity, right? So public string quiddity. And then we'll do the same thing you did. Get if. I don't want that to be capitalized. Silly Kevin. Quiddity. Null.
I was just responding to somebody in the chat asking about logging solutions.
Yeah? What do they have to say?
They're asking about large JSON payloads. So the question from SF Nerdy, I'm making at future REST JSON callouts to a legacy system, and I want to log the payload in case we want to debug. And then they pointed out that part of the problem is they have a huge JSON payload, and sometimes they get an exception for long text area field, and how can they handle that? And so I don't think that what we're doing today really solves their problem specifically.
Mm-mm.
I'm more worried today about showing how to escape the transactions so the logging is robust, and how to make it so that it's non-invasive and doesn't interact with other limits, and you can kind of insert it into existing code without a major refactor. But for their problem, I'm thinking that the best option is to split the string across multiple fields, but maybe it's even better to create a content document or something like that. If the payload is really that big, storing it as a large blob might be the best option. I haven't really played with it that much, so this is pretty much speculation, but I start to think seriously about storing it as a blob if it's not a super common operation, and that's not going to be a problem for some of the sharing constraints.
Okay. I guess I'm trying to figure out if they want to log the JSON requests, but the
full payload.
The full payload, but they don't actually want to like store that or parse it?
Well, it's longer than a single long text area field, is I think what the problem is. So there's the limit of, 144,000 characters?
Something like that.
Yeah, it's gone up a couple times. I don't remember exactly what it is, but yeah, there is a limit on the length of a long text area, and so you'd either have to parse the JSON into something and then split it that way, or string split and then reconcatenate. That's doable. Substringing at a certain number of bytes. It's kind of ugly, but it works.
I think I would rather parse it and then log sub-objects.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing if you've got an extremely large JSON payload that you're not dealing with just an extremely long series of properties in the JSON period. You've got, sub-objects in the JSON. And so I think it would be like log or store the individual clauses for objects in the JSON.
That was where I went first, but then trying to figure out the size of each of those objects so that you can split it up as valid JSON seems like it adds a lot of complexity. And I really like to keep things simple by default, which is where I'm thinking if you always treat the multiple fields as a single atomic unit, then and always concatenate them and split them at a certain byte number of characters boundary, then it doesn't matter if each field is valid JSON on its own, as long as you're treating that whole object as a single atomic unit. And that feels like it's going to be a lot simpler to implement, as long as you can make that guarantee that nobody will look at individual fields.
It's true.
We should probably get back to what we're actually trying to accomplish here, but that was an interesting sidetrack.
Rabbit holes.
Yeah.
So I created the quiddity one, and I had to go look up this because instead of being a property, it's a method. So we have to call get quiddity. I always forget whether or not quiddity is a property. I keep trying to do like just this, get current.quiddity, but it's get quiddity. And for those of you who are new to quiddity, what that's going to give us is going to give us back an enum value that is going to be something along the lines of, this is from a Visual Force form. Is it? It just says Visual Force.
Visual Force controller.
Visual Force controller or LWC controller.
Yeah, it doesn't separate between Visual Force controller extension versus standalone controller. It's just Internally, we used it to bucket the requests. So when I came up on Dreamforce stage and talked about we have X number of requests from Visual Force or from Lightning, this is kind of the more coarse bucketing that we use internally, and this is actually what our logs internally show as well.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier just now that enums can be serialized funky. This is an enum result. Do we need to cast that to a string, right?
Yes. And I need to write more Apex because I'm forgetting exactly.
I just did string value of.
I think that works.
And I should probably have it return.
The technically correct way to do it is the .name method on it. So the string value of is kind of the equivalent of trying to concatenate with a string, but not 100% of the time. I learned too much about compiler internals from talking to my team. So this is the way the docs say to do it, and to cut down on any weirdness later, I'm just going to follow them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Always follow the docs when you get a chance. Okay, so, and then I just created a getter setter for the log message itself.
Yep.
Okay.
We don't really need the getter setter, but there's no harm in it, and it's good for stylistic consistency.
Okay, so I'm going to save this. It's going to go do its thing. Back over here at our log message, we've got this here. Now, our log, we should probably also create a class called log that does something with log messages. Wait. Request.getCurrent.getQuidity does not like that. Let's look at those docs again. Where was it?
Request.getCurrent.getQuidity. Yeah, that should be it.
Request.getCurrent.getQuidity. No, it's request.getQuidity. There's no getCurrent.
Wait a second. You sure?
I'm looking at the docs here, and of course you can't see it because of the way our technology is set up, but the docs for it have request methods, getCurrent, getQuidity, and getRequestID.
Yeah, but they're methods for the request class, for an instance of it. And so the getCurrent gives you a request object instance that represents your current request, so you can call the instance methods. They're not static methods, they're instance methods, which is why I think we need the getCurrent. And I'm wondering, did you try and save, or is it just the VS Code tool?
Yeah, I did try to save. Let's also make sure that I created a fork of, a branch of Apex recipes. Let's make sure that we've actually gone in and created a, where is it? It's not that file, it's this one, where we have the project set up. It could be that I just need to create a new scratch org. It could be that the scratch org is on 49.
Is that? Maybe. I'm not on the VPN to go check if there's still pods running v49 or not.
What, would the scratch org have been updated?
Yeah, it should. So, interesting tangent if we have time for it. So the way our upgrades work is orgs aren't individually upgraded. It's an entire pod level process. Because if you think about it, Salesforce is this giant Java monolith with a whole bunch of other sub pieces going along with it. And part of our version upgrades of the core app sometimes include things like swapping out the JVM version, migrate to a new patch. A couple of releases ago, we did move to a newer, entirely different major JVM version. And so you can't really change the JVM version and a whole bunch of these dependencies on a per org basis, which is why there's the sandbox preview cycle that's the way it is that process is about getting your sandbox to be on a pod that's upgraded sooner or later, because the upgrade process is entirely pod-wide. And there isn't really a way of upgrading an org as it streams during the sandbox cloning process, which is why that process is a little bit arbitrary in some of its behavior, is because it's trying to coordinate your wishes for an org level preference with our infrastructural needs for pod level upgrades. So if you were on a pod that got upgraded, and I think they're all upgraded,
probably
you should have version 50 supported.
I just created a new scratch org because they're super quick to create. Somebody actually pointed out that I had misspelled quiddity. I had a D there, like that.
Yep.
And it's a T. And so that method was not found because it turns out I misspelled it. So
and it is an instance method. I'm looking at the docs and it shows it as an instance method. So yes, I was right.
Yep, you're right. I'm gonna have to fix this though because this is gonna drive me nuts because I misspelled it. Quiddity. Yes, I know.
I think I wrote the spec for this class a while back, so if I was wrong about its use, that would have been really embarrassing.
Well, I just renamed our quiddity
field
so that we can. Let's see. It's still pushing the code. It's got a whole bunch of stuff to push here. So, good call. Who was that? Let's say Deepak was the one who put it in there. James and Deepak. Good.
And SFTC dev too. Wow, everybody was yelling at us.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things I wish we had was like a ding that went off whenever somebody left a chat message, so that I could, be like, okay, what's going on? But hey, look, that pushed just fine. So now we got our log message class, and I'm going to create a new class, and we're going to call it log, because that's what naming things is hard. Just go with it. We're going to put this in the shared code. All right. So, first thing we can do is set up a private log message. Like that, right? And so just by instantiating log, well, no. How do we want to structure this? Because I'm thinking that I probably want to be able to do log dot
save.
Something like that. Save log dot publish.
Yeah, log dot publish. That's better.
Log dot publish, which would make this a static. So.
Or do we want it to just be a singleton? I mean, we just did that. The request class is kind of a singleton, but not really, so that you can mock it in testing. Do we want to do the same type of thing with log, where we have a static singleton-like current property on it? So you could say log.current.add log.current.publish.
How about just log.current.publish? Why would we add rather than just publish?
There is still. Let me go take a look at the release notes. So when you fire a platform event, even if it's non-transactional, they count against a new separate publishing limit of 150 event bus publish calls. So
a day?
No, per request.
Oh, okay.
But
I was going to say, wait, what?
I always like to assume that somebody else is going to consume the majority of limits.
Yeah.
And so if you're in a context where you know that you're going to be creating multiple log messages, publishing each one synchronously seems like it's a little bit of a waste. So maybe we'd allow some sort of batch publishing is kind of what I'm thinking of. So you can add a log message and then publish clears out the queue. And so if you're in a context where you're only logging one thing and you want to fire it immediately, you can absolutely do that. But if you're in a method with like an inner loop and each cycle through the inner loop adds logs, then you'd publish at the end of the method call to be safe.
Okay. So
is that overkill? You tell me.
No, I think that's probably a good architecture. So you said make this a singleton. This will be the first singleton pattern in Apex recipes. I'm curious to see how you would implement it. Interesting.
Although, do I want it to be a property, or do I want it to actually be a method to note that it's doing something?
It is doing something, so
make it a method get. And then private log. If for instance no.
Now I'm just curious. I'm wondering if we don't have a null coalescing operator, but we do have the safe navigation operator. I wonder if there's a way to use that when we call this, because it's not going to get's not the constructor.
Well, so get will implicitly construct an instance, assign it to that, and then return it no matter what.
Oh,
so get is always safe.
Interesting. Okay.
If current instance doesn't exist yet, calling log.get. I mean, we probably should call this logger for the sake of Yeah, I don't know if it's worth renaming it, but
we'll make that change in post in editing.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so then you say logger.get, and if logger isn't defined on the current request, it would be defined at that point. And that'll happen inside the get method, so you don't have to worry as a consumer of the logger class or log class about what its internal state is. So going back to the encapsulation fundamentals.
Yeah. Okay, so then we would just create a public static, and we would just we could do add, public static add, and it's going to be void. And we're going to want to, this is going to be we're going to accept a string. Message to log.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We also might want to have, and those don't have to be static now. That's the nice thing.
Oh, you're right.
So the reason I love this pattern, by the way, is because it makes it easy to create log instances in tests and work with them without having that type of static state that you have to manually clear and manipulate. And potentially you could have separate logger instances if you wanted to that fire to different platform event types. So it's not something we're going to do today. This is like enterprise pattern overkill. But we could make it so the logger type, when it's initialized, lets you pass in a custom event type so that we could have different event streams for different log streams. Whether we want that to be warning versus error versus info or by business unit. So we have the default log to something generally, which is kind of the just log to console out equivalent. But this pattern can be extended without breaking the happy path use case. And so that's kind of the reason I'm going for some of these architectural patterns is I'm used to writing code that other people will extend and maintain down the line without necessarily talking to me. And there's value in not boxing yourself in. Exactly.
I love that. So I've just added a couple of methods in here. One, because I think it'd be great if we can do the string message to log, but also have one where we can log out that exception. So serialize the exception.
Yeah, definitely. I think that makes a lot of sense because then you don't have everybody trying to rebuild their own string concatenation for exception handling, which is exactly what the value proposition of this class is standardizing common operations.
Exactly.
So our event is log
message.
You know what? I'm going to call this log _e for now, but probably should technically be a list of S-object for the extensibility I was just talking about, but let's not go too crazy.
Okay. Oh, okay. Now, out of curiosity, why wouldn't you just initialize that on line 5?
Toss up.
Okay. I mean,
I like constructors because they don't box. Going back to the whole boxing me in thing, if we ever have a subclass of log for one of the things I was just talking about, like maybe we don't use log directly, maybe we subclass log for the different logging by business unit, then it can call the superclass constructor or not. It gives you a little bit more flexibility, but it's totally an arbitrary taste thing. This is like a tabs versus spaces. That's pretty weak reasoning at the end of the day. I feel like this is easier to read.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I was just curious. It's also like, sometimes I do do the array syntax because I'm old.
I like how this codeLive is turning into arguing about coding styles, but that just means you'll have to have me back soon for a follow-up episode. So here's my reason for not liking the array syntax in Apex, which is the arrays and lists in Apex, despite being interchangeable, act like lists. They automatically extend themselves, and they just ultimately have the behavior of a list rather than the more fundamental array concept. And so I feel like list is being more intellectually honest.
Sure, but is much faster to type.
Totally.
Especially since I can often just accidentally hit both of the characters at the same time on my keyboard. So, okay. So we've got a buffer, and when we add something to it, we're basically going to add a new list or a new log. This
log
is an
message.
E, not a C.
Yeah, so we have the log message type to represent each log. Oh, so actually, I shouldn't put the raw platform event here. This should be log message. Haha. And then any customization around what type of event it turns into can go into log message. Oh yes, this is separation of concerns.
All right, so request ID, quiddity, and we're going to need, yeah. Ooh, an S object.
No reason to be specific here. It's always going to return log underscore E for now, but I don't like to amend the contract later.
Yep.
Turn. This is where the implementation doesn't have any of the magic. It's just the return type.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we say, what were our fields?
We've got quiddity, spelled correctly. Aha, accidental productivity is the best productivity. Agent Utah, that's correct. Yes. Jim Bartek says, we like having a DML handler class. It is called to do any DML, catch the errors, and save them to an errors object.
Yeah, I mean, that
similar to what we're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, this seems like it fits into that of you have your DML wrapper for the same type of reasons we're talking about here, for abstracting away some of the boilerplate code, and you'd wire it up to this logging framework once it's ready, so that you have a nice framework for that too. Why not? I'm going to change this string to just be message, because I feel like it's really confusing to have a log message property on a class called log message.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. And is it request ID? No, it's just request ID. Okay.
Yep. That's supposed to be comma.
Oh.
Yep. Cool.
Okay, so we've got a new message there. I like that. So now in our log class, what we can do is we can just do our buffer dot add new log message.
And did you download the event, by the way? There's some arguing in the chat about the correct form for request ID. Should there be an underscore between request and ID on the field?
Well, as it turns out, I created a new Scratch org in between there, but it is request underscore ID. So we're going to have to, here, let's...
Fine.
Okay.
So, request underscore ID, because we have log underscore message, so we should stick with the convention.
Yes.
Pick one and stick to it.
Yes.
I think that's, out of all the arguments about syntax and style, I think that's the key takeaway is
pick one and stick to it.
Work with your peers, pick one and stick with it, whether or not it's the one you like. I kind of like tabs. I know that's blasphemous to a lot of people. Most of my coworkers like spaces, so I always use spaces. It's fine.
Okay. So it's going to fail because we don't actually have that message created. So let me go create that. If it'll let me open the default org, come on. And then, yeah, we'll need to populate that.
So we probably also want a constructor on log message. The string message. Probably also want a log message constructor that has an exception.
No, you cannot have a variable named E.
Can you have a variable named exception? That might
yeah, that's actually, yeah.
I win again. I think EX is, honestly, for something that generic, I find EX to be an appropriate name. It's pretty clear.
I try to keep at least 3 characters in my variable names, but I'm struggling on what to call exception.
It's super generic, and like when it's in a use case that's this generic and this short-lived and there's nothing else to pollute it, that's when I start to... I don't want to end up with another XML HTTP request where XML is all capitalized and HTTP is only title cased because of a weird Microsoft style guide concern. Like, I hate that.
Yeah.
All right. Equals.
It's not letting me open my scratch org. We just gonna do the message, or are we gonna? Oh, okay.
Let's say ex. Oh god, I gotta open up the docs to remember what's on exception.
So we've got get message, and we've got get stack trace.
Yeah.
Exception class Salesforce. Built-in exceptions.
I can't wait until we have the reference split out, so it's easier to search some of the stuff.
Aw, that just makes it too easy to use. It's actually where is the?
I might have to actually file a doc bug to improve this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna find it. Alright, catching different exception handling.
Common methods?
Built-in exceptions and common methods. There we go.
Yes.
That's the page I was... No?
Query exception methods. Get cause, get line number.
There we go.
Get message. Yeah.
So we want to start with probably the type. Get name. Space. I want to put brackets around that just so that it's clear that there's a separator. People can argue we can tweak this later, but having something around any inputs just to make it clear if it's malformed or whatever or weird makes it nice. And then I'd put get message. So there's our exception type with brackets around it, colon, the message of the exception, plus new line.
Now, for those of you who've never seen this before, because of the way this works, if you use the /n, you get a new line. So whenever you ever see that in a string, that's what it's doing. It's giving you a new line in the string. Now, Chris, we're rapidly approaching a line length issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reformat this just a little bit.
Cool. It's your workspace that I'm just a visitor in, so you get the last word.
Well, I'm just trying to make sure everything's consistent within the greater project here. So somebody asked if it's going to let me open the scratch org. It does not appear to be letting me open the scratch org. I noticed we had an issue with resolving and getting the DNS to resolve for Lightning Experience custom domains, which are going to be critical for the scratch org to work. So it appears like we're going to have to test this a little blindly here, but I think we're off to a good start on this. We've got our message if we have a string. We've got a message if it's an exception. So in our log class, we can come over here and we can say our new log message with message to log. We'll rely on the constructor to build it. And down here we can do the same thing, buffer dot add new log message exception to log. It's pretty easy. And then how do we want to do this publish bit? This is the crucial bit, because we're going to need to actually fire a platform event or fire off multiple platform events without using the call.
So the event bus publish method that I had up and then closed in favor of looking up exception methods, so that was probably a mistake.
Yeah.
There is bus. You type it right. Bus class. Okay, so there is a overload of the publish method that takes a list of S objects for platform events. So we can do a bulk publish.
Okay.
So event bus dot publish, and then we pass in the S object list.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
And just do this buffer.
So we pass in. We can't pass in buffer directly because we have to coerce them into platform events first.
What?
So
because we made.
Yeah.
It's a list of log. Okay.
We make a new list. We go for buffer. To what did I call that method?
To event.
To event. Yep. And then now we can just say publish raw logs. This dot clear. Cool. So I think that'll do exactly what we want.
Yeah. And then, okay, so the way we've architected this, it's fairly extensible. Right? I think this is a good path.
You can subclass log message if you want to. You could later on inject logic about which exception type you want in the log message. You could add on a severity field. In fact, that might actually be something we'd want to do if we had more time.
Well, depending on whether or not we can actually open the scratch org, we may have plenty of time since we're not going to be able to test this. So let's try opening the scratch org one more time. It does not look like it's going to behave with us. So let's pretend that we've got this working. It's in production. We love it. We got the much coveted parking spot of Developer of the Month for our company, and now we need to come back in and add the severity. So if we come back over to our log message, I'm assuming that's where we're going to put it in the log message, right? Or is it going to be in log?
Say that again. I was answering a chat question.
No, it's fine. So if we want to add severity, would we start in the log class itself, or would you put it in the log message?
I always consider that to be a property of the message.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
You might have logging channels based on severity, but the message itself defines its severity.
I would tend to say that severity should be an enum, but enums can be a little funky when...
Well, we have this class so that we can handle all that funkiness. So make it an enum.
Okay.
And in our toLog method, we can handle that.
That's a good call.
In fact, for quiddity, we probably want to make that the actual enum now that I think about it.
Okay.
Because we have this extra layer of indirection, I can say quiddity.name down here. And you know what? I am going to do something crazy. I'm going to safe nav.
Oh, snap. Safe nav. Look at that. It's one of my favorite features of Apex that has come out recently. Let's see. So we've got info error warning. And
so that way, if the quiddity isn't defined for some reason, which there always should be a quiddity, but the last thing I want to do is have my logging framework fail if an invariant of my system fails, because I would try and log that the invariant has failed, and then hit the same issue and my log would fail. So robustness here is worth it.
Yes. Info error warn. What other log levels do you think we should have, or severity issues?
Info error warn. Maybe debug.
Oh yeah, debug.
You might go crazy and do something like use hierarchical custom settings to turn on debug logging that's not normally enabled. So like you normally wouldn't want debug logs to be emitted because there's probably a lot of volume and they clutter up your logs. But you could use a hierarchical custom setting to turn on by user or by profile when you need to do more invasive debugging. Instead of having to use debug logs, which for something like the site guest user gets really hairy really quickly.
Yeah.
You could turn it on this kind of passive behind-the-scenes debugging and leave it on for a week if something weird is going on. And I don't need to make this safe nav because that will never be null. But
severity. No, it's interesting. Severity can be null. Enum. Well, we've got the enum, but we don't actually have a property for it yet.
So stylistic, I would kick severity out into its own top-level class so that we can have a property in here named severity without it being a problem.
Yeah.
So I would make log severity a separate enum class. This is what we did for quiddity in the standard library. So like the request class is actually what we internally call file-based Apex, which is literally an Apex file. It's not written in Java, it's written in Apex that's baked into the platform. And so we had the same constraints when we were writing the request class as we do right here and we're talking about. And that's why quiddity is a top-level class, is so that we could make it so that you didn't have to say request.quiddity whenever you're working with it. So it's kind of funny that the same constraints apply here.
Yeah. So we would have to put this in its own file, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I would move it to a top-level class that's just the enum and call it log severity, because that makes it easier to work with.
Like it.
And now we just have this property for called severity that's of type log severity.
Okay. So got that there. And then we can go back into our log message, and it's going to be log severity.
I just updated that, unless I spelled it wrong.
No, I mean, there's every opportunity for me to have spelled it wrong, but I think that's correct. Okay. And then we're going to get the severity name. I like this. This is looking good.
Yeah.
All right, so we've added the severity. And with 13 minutes left, I'm going to try once more.
I feel like we have to come back for part 2. This was fun.
I think we should make this a somewhat reoccurring thing, maybe once a quarter or so. Keep coming back to, the Chris and Kevin coding typo share. But let's see, is it going to let me in? I should not have created that. Do I have another Apex Recipes one? It's expired. No, I don't. Okay. So we've got our log severity. Now, if we wanted to use this, and let's just give us some example usages of it here. So like our publish method, we should also have a publish method that accepts a single thing, because sometimes instead you don't want to call add and then publish, you might just want to call publish with a exception. Exception to log. And we probably also want a... Oh, look at that. Look at that. It is opening our scratch org. Okay, while that opens, here I'm going to go over here. I'll do public void publish string message to log. And Chris, do you want to populate these two methods while I set up our platform event here?
Sure. Which ones were you looking at? I was cleaning up the log message internals using string.format so that it was less string concatenation. Which one were you looking at?
In log.cl, the bottom two.
Yep. I'm still new to this whole live share thing. It's like a weird form of black magic, but I like it.
It is magical. I'll put it that. I'll say that. I'm glad I can take this page anywhere, but right now I just want it to load on my screen. All right, new platform event. We called it log because we're creative that way. And
since we already wrote the guts of that, they're both one-liners. Nice. Oh wait, sorry, those are publish.
Yeah.
Right. You're saying an immediate publish on those.
Okay, and for this we had a text string called request ID.
Interestingly, both of those I feel like should publish the entire buffer. So if something is already in the buffer, it should publish that as well. So it shouldn't publish just this one event. It should add this new event to the buffer and then publish the entire buffer to make sure nothing gets lost. I don't like the state of having a buffer that can be dirty but not published during the next publish call. There's not really a limit benefit to that either. So I made sure that these add to the buffer and then publish.
I like it.
Instead of publishing directly.
I like it. I would not have thought of that. That's a very good point. I like that a lot. Okay, so I just created the request ID. We also need the log message ID one, and then we should be able to test this real quick, right?
Yeah.
Oh no, wait. Previous. For the log message, we need the full thing. Okay, fine. 131072. Great. Save that. Nope. Save that. And then we also had quiddity, which was 32 characters, you said?
So that was my best guess, yeah.
Okay.
You made me get off the VPN so that this wouldn't lag, so I don't have the core application source code up.
Sure, I'm just going to make it 64 then. Just,
Yeah,
go hog wild. I'm going to make this required field. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back into our log message. I'm going to make it required too, because I can't make it required because it's a long text field. Interesting. Okay.
That's all right. I don't think anybody's going to try and publish without it, and
I'm going to pull the source so that we know about our stuff here. And so you've done this string concatenation and the string formatting here. Do we not just want to like JSON serialize it?
Right, in the log message, you mean, or?
Yeah.
Yes, we do. You are right. Well, okay, so we have string as a message. So I guess that's an interesting architectural question. Do we want to support complex objects for logging and then JSON serialize them? Or do we want the caller to be responsible for JSON serializing them? And I feel like it's probably overkill for this framework to try and do all of that in it. But there's nothing that says we can't create a subclass of log message later that does that if we want to.
That's fair.
So given that we have 6 minutes left, I think it's a fool's errand to start on that project.
Okay. So we'll just make sure that they can do it on their own.
Yeah, and like you said, we probably should do this more often.
Yes.
The chat seemed to agree with that.
All right.
And
Well,
it's a very great excuse for me to go and write code, which I miss doing more of.
I mean, do they not let you write code?
How many unread emails do I have? Let's see.
I mean,
Logged in to find out.
If we're going by unread emails, I can't write code either.
Most of mine, people get mad if I don't respond. Okay, I only have 401 unread, so that's better than I expected.
I'm like 3,000. Like when April hit or March hit, and it was like daily emails from everybody with the phrase "in these unprecedented times." I
have a filter for those.
Yeah. Okay, come on, keep.
Yeah, Kevin Chat says we have to do this more often, so maybe we should do another one of these to finish this up before the end of the year.
Yeah, we can do that.
Talk.
I want to try and record a couple, so for like Thanksgiving week and Christmas week, we're not actually in front of a computer. So maybe that would be a good one. So let's. I'm trying to get this to save because it was like log e doesn't exist, and then severity, and so we're. Okay, that failed.
Correct signature name. So you did create the log severity class?
Yep.
Is that what we called it?
Maybe it didn't save yet.
Oh, you created an enum called severity within the class. That was the difference. So I am going to hack up your log severity class if you don't mind.
Go for it. Teach me.
You're
just going to do it as the top level.
Exactly. And so that means this class can never be more than just an enum definition, but that's fine. It doesn't need to be.
Yeah, okay. I can see that. I can see how useful that is.
And that's what we did for the quiddity class. It's literally, well, it's not literally defined this way because we marshaled the values from Java, but it would have been defined this way if we didn't use Blackmagic.
Okay. So this one says current instance doesn't exist. Is it? It's spelled right, so I think we need to do...
Oh, I forgot to make this static.
Yeah.
That should fix that.
Save that. I love these codeLives where it comes down to the wire as to whether or not we can get it to work. So, alright, we got everything saved. So if we were going to...
Do you see the extra tab I wrote? Some really basic sample code?
I don't.
Okay.
Here, if I create a new...
Yeah, if you create it, I think it shows up.
Here's a place where you can paste it.
Sweet. Maybe I'll just do it in Untitled 1 because I don't see your new paste place.
Okay.
Alright, in Untitled 1, I think that should work if we just do it as an anonymous block.
Okay.
Because you can actually define a class inside an execute anonymous block. It's super weird, but for the sake of this, it's a good test case. I don't recommend it normally.
And how are we going to see that this ran?
Well, we don't have anything listening to the events, so...
And it failed to run anyway. Let's see what's why. Invalid type log.
Huh? Invalid type log? We have log.
It's right there.
Okay. Yeah. Log.get. It's a static method get that returns a log instance. Yeah, what? Are you running against the right Scratch org? It's the only thing I can imagine.
Yeah. Yep. Why are... Let me just save this again. Maybe it didn't... Maybe it's confused. Okay, so that said there was there. Let's run this. Execute anonymous, currently selected text. Failed to run. Line 1, column 1, log. Is log a reserved word? I don't think so.
Shouldn't be, otherwise it wouldn't have saved anyways.
Your logic has no place here. Okay, here, let's do it this way. Developer console. Good old developer console. Log.
Oh man, so many tooling PMs would be yelling at us if they were on this right now. At least we're not using Workbench.
Work what? No, it doesn't like it.
Huh.
Open. Classes. Log. Log exists.
I'm so confused.
I'm glad to know I'm not the only one. Let's see if somebody's pointing out in the chat that we've got a typo somewhere. Let's see.
Nope.
I
got that open on the other monitor.
Siva, we are gonna. This is going to make its way into Apex recipes. That's what we're building this in, but probably not today. So, private static log, current instance, and doesn't like log. Oh, I bet you it's because of that. Yep, that's what it was.
Do I want to know?
Well, no, because now I have no idea what it was. I had in there, I had new log get. Like that. Oh, you can't see my screen.
Nope.
Here, let me put it in. I had this.
You were using a constructor.
Yeah.
Ha-ha!
But you're not.
Shame.
And so...
Yeah, this is where I'd like to plug a really good book called Effective Java that taught me a whole bunch of really great reasoning about why Java standard library design patterns were the way they were.
That worked.
And I brought that with me into Apex, and a lot of the stuff you're hearing today is like directly courtesy of Joshua Block, Effective Java, informing how I think about designing APIs. So, really good book, strongly recommend it.
Okay. So it looks like we have the logs are showing that it is calling to event and it's getting our request ID, etc. We just don't have anything listening to those, and we are officially 1 minute over. So I'm going to say we're going to come back to this. We're going to test it with unit testing, and we're going to test this with just some functional testing and pulling in the making sure this works and listening to those log classes, probably with a platform event trigger. But until then, toodaloos, and we will see you all again, or I will see you all again next week with another Code Live. Thank you much.